Welcome to UNCAGED. Today we're speaking with Shannon Watson. Shannon is the founder and executive director of Majority in the Middle, which is a civic organization created with the goal of finding solutions to structural partisanship and being a space for those who don't feel represented by the political extremes. So I'm excited to talk about that in a second. Tell us a little bit about you and your career.
Fantastic. So I am, I'm calling in from beautiful Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I live. Woohoo! It's not snowing today, which is unusual. We think we're done. We've had like the third snowiest winter on record. So we're all, we're over it. We are over it. So I'm a Minnesotan by choice. I've lived here for the last decade plus. I'm a Kansan by birth. I have, I've spent 25 plus years, I stopped counting after 25, in public policy, government relations, political campaigns. What else? I'm the oldest child and I fit every single check the psychological boxes. I'm very much an oldest child. And I have a dog and her name is CJ and she's awesome. And
that's
yes,
awesome.
She's named after CJ Craig from The West Wing.
Oh, great. Well, so clearly political action, I'd say bipartisan action is in your blood. So tell me about what you've built here with Majority in the Middle.
Awesome. So the organization was founded at the end of 2020, September-ish timeframe. And that was right after the impetus for this was the first presidential debate between Trump and Biden. And I didn't watch the debate. I didn't need to. It wasn't going to, change my vote or anything. But I watched social media before and afterwards. And the thing that I noticed beyond just the people on the far right doubling down on their candidate and people on the far left doubling down on their candidate was the number of people in the middle who were like, politics is gross. I don't want to have anything to do with it. This is ugly. I have been watching for probably about the last 15 years, the chasm between right and left going further and further apart. And partially that's because, the extremes are the loudest voices. And what I call normal people don't necessarily want to participate. But what I was seeing in 2020 was even people who I consider to be very political people, people who serve in office or serve, as in their party unit, or who've worked in politics, being like, this is enough, I'm out. And so at that point I was like, well, we really need to do something about it. And a lot of the partisanship in this country is it's structural. There's a lot of power in division, and there's a lot of systems that back that up. So we put together this organization to try to work on that. That's
great. I'm a big believer in trying to find solutions to problems and not get stuck in what side are you on issues. So it's a wonderful thing that you have built here. But let's put it into kind of the context of today. I mean, certainly the political landscape has never been more divided, as well as a situation where I would say it's chaotic, seems stressful to even the most calm person in the world. So, I mean, tell me, what are the hot button issues right now?
The thing that we have heard the most about is how that political divisions that used to be just in political spaces have started creeping into business and community and our workplaces in ways that they haven't before. And like politics is really the only business, the part of the challenge with politics in business is that politics is really the only place where you can sort of discount half of your coworkers and what they think and what they believe and be like, I'm just not going to work with those people because you believe different things. And businesses look at that, and every day, Americans look at that and they're like, well, I don't particularly agree with Andy from accounting, but I still have to work with him. And And nobody's gonna, put on Twitter how Andy from accounting is a terrible human being.
Right.
So just the fact that this is the space that politicians work in, and that's sort of the cultural climate, is sort of shocking. And businesses like consistency and predictability. And so when there's a lot of swings back and forth based on, who controls the agenda and what that's going to mean, I don't have to tell you, the stock market does not embrace inconsistency.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think really finding that way that we can be more practical is really key. But I mean, Shannon, clearly you've been involved in this space for a while, and I love the fact that you got this going in 2020. I would be remiss to ask how the pandemic impacted the formation of this thing and maybe that early history of the business.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think, and there's nobody's done this study, so I don't have any data to point to. But one of the things about 2020, and particularly the election, that I think was really extra polarizing was because we didn't have, during the pandemic, and there was lockdowns, and there was no sports, and there wasn't, so we couldn't, as people, humans are genetically coded to form in groups and out groups. And so, this is our team and that's that team. And in healthy spaces, I mean, like Packers Vikings or, whatever other sort of rivalry, those are really sort of healthy competition type cultures.
Yeah.
In 2020, when we were dealing with the pandemic and there wasn't as much outlet for healthy competition, when there wasn't sports on TV and there wasn't all these things. The only thing that we were left with was that 2020 presidential election. And so that was where all of our competitive juices sort of flowed.
Yeah.
And so I that's my personal theory. That's why I think it was so extra divisive.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We didn't have outlets to perhaps calm people down and get people to prioritize the things that were the big issues. And, the one thing that I always feel is that 98% of the things out in the world, we all have in common, we're all in violent agreement about, and for some reason we focus on the 2% all the time, which is really crazy. But Shannon, I mean, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, I'd say, really kind of the passion that you have for what you do, especially in the space that you work in. It's one of these things where I imagine there may be Monday mornings where you're thinking, man, I do not want to do this, but what keeps the fire going on this one?
So the organization started in 2020, and until January of this year, it was a side project. Like most entrepreneurs, the full-time gigs start as a side project. And in January, I was spending some time up at the Minnesota State Capitol in St. Paul, and there was this appetite. I was feeling this appetite and this openness to sort of cross the aisle and kind of fix some of the division, both from politicians, but then also just from people, because we have all figured out this is not sustainable. So I took the leap to, I left my other job and am focusing solely on this. And you're right, some days what have I done? But that's like a lot of other entrepreneurs, there's a reason that you do it. You get up in the morning and you do it. And then there's a reason that, you don't want to. And when you have to do all of the things, when you don't have an Andy to do your accounting, that can be hard. But I will say, I literally learned bipartisanship at the dinner table growing up. My dad is what I call a legacy Republican, very much a member of the party because of the party platform, and has been for a long time. My mother is a Democrat or a libertarian, depending on the day and the issue. We joke that sometimes she's so far left, she just sort of wraps around the other side. And so this idea that you can't be in relationship with people that you don't have the same political sort of alignment with, no matter how many other things you have in common, to your point, that's so foreign to me, because my parents have been making it work, married every day since June 6th. Oh gosh, am I going to get this right? June 6th, 1970. So that's 50 some years, right? And And so they modeled that. We got all the literature and we got all the door knockers, and it was expected you vote as soon as you turn 18. And so that's the kind of thing. Like, I have seen it work really well, and I have seen it work in other spaces. I was recently asked to speak at there was a church here in Minnesota that for Lent, they do a Lent learning series.
Yeah.
And they asked, their series was about polarization. And so they asked me to come talk about why we're polarized and what normal people can do about it. And that was awesome. I will say, like, it's like, really, church is talking about political polarization? But so that's the point, is that it has seeped into all of our other spaces in ways that have gotten in the way, and it's not just politics anymore. So being invited to do those things and in those conversations and hearing that this is a thing that a lot of people care about, that's really sort of what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, I love that. I think the background that you have at the dinner table has served you well.
Absolutely.
To hear both sides, it reminds me of, back in the day where, nobody reads newspapers really anymore. I mean, I suppose we sometimes, some people still read them online, but you'd have these TV shows where they would pull the top 5 newspapers and they would show you kind of the same story covered from 5 different perspectives. And I always thought that show was so helpful in terms of learning that a topic could be portrayed in 5 different ways, right?
Absolutely.
And that you as an individual, it was your job as perhaps a citizen as well as just a person to make your own decisions on that, but also to make sure that you looked at it from all those different lenses, and it was kind of always interesting for me. And I know we've gotten so far away from that these days, but hopefully the work that you guys are doing can help us find a middle ground. But I mean, here we are in 2023. I mean, it's certainly a year full of lovely political discussions. We find ourselves in a world that is quite complex, and domestic market here in the US, where we have, challenges with potential elections coming up, as well as legal wranglings of a former president. So it is what it is. But what's on the docket for you guys in 2023?
So we have 3 buckets of work that we're working on. The first one is working with elected officials who are elected in a partisan space. So, they run as a Democrat or Republican or, any number of third-party candidacies. Working with them to highlight the bipartisanship that is happening. It doesn't show up on the front page of the paper, basically because, people getting along is kind of a boring story. So there is that work that is happening. There is aisle crossing that does go on. And so we're working with them to kind of elevate those stories and to your point, bring the attention to the people who write the newspapers. We have an initiative for local elected officials this is more of a study at this point, but how do we keep the nonpartisan offices nonpartisan and sort of avoid that political polarization creeping into those spaces? Like, trash and potholes should not be partisan issues. There's no reason for that to be. And then we have a bucket of work that it focuses on individuals and talking to people, like, politics may not be the easiest thing to engage in right now, but it's important, and why it's important. And when the middle opts out, then all you're left with is the loudest free voices, people who like the game or who use division for nefarious reasons. So there's a lot that we can do. There's only so many hours in the day, and that's what that's sort of the challenge. But I go back to my high school economics professor, that a nonprofit is a tax status, not a business plan. So luckily the work that I've done over the years with different membership organizations, the Chamber of Commerce and Medical Alley Association and National Conference of State Legislatures and all of those places that have a lot of different stakeholders and I wind up with a lot of different bosses, I think serves me well in this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been really interesting talking with you, Shannon. If someone wanted to learn more about what Majority in the Middle is working on, where's the best place to reach you?
Our website, www.majoritymiddle.com. And we take it in the out, but majoritymiddle.com.
Excellent. Majoritymiddle.com. Well, we've been speaking with Shannon Watson. She's the founder and executive director of Majority in the Middle, which is a civic organization created with the goal of finding solutions to structural partisanship and being a space for those who don't feel represented by the political extremes, which I think is a pretty big majority in the middle.
It is very much
Shannon,
so.
We really appreciate the work that you and your team are doing, and we look forward to hearing more about it in the future. Thank you so much for being on UNCAGED Day, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks so much. Good to talk to you.
Cheers.